And then finally, I want to talk about reallocating water. Because if you think about it, that's all the water we have. You know, it's the milkshake glass. No more water's being made. We're drinking the same water as the dinosaurs drank. It's all this hydrologic cycle. The problem is, it's not where we need it, when we need it, in the form that we need it. So what are we going to do about that? Well, what I think is, let growth pay its own way. It's about time. And by that I mean a demand offset system. If you want to insert a new straw into the public water supply, you should be required to persuade someone else to take her straw out of the supply, so that at least it's not making things worse. And a story I'll tell you about that comes out of Utah, and it's the Geneva Steel Company. It was a company built by the a plant built by the U.S. government during the Second World War for steel for aircraft to fight the war, and they located it in Utah. After the war, the U.S. spun the company off to U.S. Steel, and U.S. Steel ran it for several generations. But gosh, by the end of the 20th century, the steel industry in the United States was on the ropes. Pittsburgh had 100-year-old blast furnaces. Detroit was making automobiles that no one seemed to want to buy. The Chinese steel industry was young, aggressive, had new modern machinery. They were seizing market share. And so Geneva Steel had to try and cut back. They had to try and reorganize. They went into bankruptcy. They tried to reorganize in bankruptcy. That didn't work. Eventually, they had to just sell off everything they had, just sell off all the parts and everything. But they had some very substantial assets that they liquidated. First, they had land. This plant was located just outside Provo, Utah, where Brigham Young University is. So this is prime land on the Wasatch Front. That brought in $46 million, just the land. The mill machinery, the equipment, the blast furnaces and so on, they sold to a Chinese company for $40 million. They had an iron ore mine that brought in 10. They had pollution reduction credits that brought in 4. All told, they netted $100 million. And then they sold the water rights for 102. Yeah. The water rights were worth more than all of these other very substantial assets combined. This is the future of water in the United States, as it should be. And what happened in Utah was that the state engineer, Jerry Old, said, we're not going to play this game of charades anymore, where I dole out permits to divert water, to drill wells as though they were popcorn or peanuts or something. We're not going to do that. If you want to put a new straw in the glass, you're going to persuade someone else to use less. That way we keep the system in some semblance of balance. So this is happening around the West, and it will continue to happen. The pace has been slow and episodic. I did a report for the Brookings Institution in October about this that you can get online. It's called Shopping for Water, and you can get it from the Brookings site, or my publisher brought it out as an ebook. Island Press, you can just download it if you like Kindle readers, called Shopping for Water. And I roll up my sleeves and get into some of the down and dirty stuff about intricacies of water law and policy, what specific things need to change. But this is really happening. And the reason why I know it's happening is I've done a study for the National Science Foundation with 2 economists about water marketing in the American West. And we found a tremendous amount of marketing going on. We found something very surprising, though. We found that even though there were a lot of trades between farmers, say an alfalfa grower to a broccoli grower, most of the trades were from agriculture into municipal, industrial, and environmental. And yet, aggregate farm income did not go down. How can that be? Well, because farmers are savvy business people, and when a developer comes to a farmer and says, I want to buy some of your water rights, she might say, no, I like farming, I don't want to sell. End of story. She might say, how much was that again? Okay, And she talks to her family and says, that land out by the barn, it's all clay soil, pretty low yield, 1 bushels per acre. Why don't we fallow it? And so they take the deal. Or in another story I tell in the book, a ranching family in Oregon said, that's $700,000. We could do a lot of modernization of farm infrastructure. We could not use earthen canals anymore. We could move from flood irrigation, which is very wasteful and inefficient, into a center pivot system or into drip or micro systems, and leave water as the environmental group that's paying us would like us to for the fish at the end of the season, and that's what they did. So you end up growing the same amount of product but with less water, and the water's freed up for some other users. And a final thing that farmers are doing is they're adjusting their crop mix. This is a photograph from Yuma, Arizona. This is cultivation of iceberg lettuce. Yuma is the iceberg capital, really. January, pretty much, if you're eating lettuce in the United States, it's going to come from the Pacific from the Southwest, Arizona, and to some extent California. And you can see it takes a score of workers, better part of a day to work that field. And that head of iceberg that you buy at the market, it doesn't come like that in the field. It comes with all of these other leaves sticking out, and they all need to be macheted away, and then the head gets put into the box. So if you look at the foreground of that slide, really what you're seeing there is wasted water. Those are all the excess leaves that have no economic value, and they're cut off the head and left there to desiccate under the desert sun. And so what some farmers are doing is moving to grow baby lettuces. And goodness knows, has that taken off or what? I mean, we're all buying these plastic boxes, squares or rectangles of baby lettuces, arugula and dandelion greens, hopefully before they did Roundup. And these other weird lettuces that we're all eating. And have you noticed how much you're paying for that box of lettuce? Yeah, and farmers happen to have noticed that too. And so this is how they harvest it. It takes 4 guys a couple of hours. They have basically a tractor trailer rig on the left and this contraption on the right that's pushed by a tractor. And it's essentially a gigantic electric razor that's cutting off the leaves just below the root zone. They go up that conveyor belt. They fall into the back into boxes, and then they're moved from that box over to the tractor trailer. When the tractor trailer is full, they go off to the market. I've been in Yuma last couple of months twice. I got to go through one of these processing plants, triple washed, a $30 million washing plant to wash lettuces. Just unbelievable state of the art. All recycled. One bin's got spinach, one has chopped lettuce for restaurants, one has a coleslaw mix, really quite stunning. And then when they're finished, that's what the row looks like. The tractor trailer goes off to the processing plant. The other tractor comes down with some fertilizer. No need for pesticides. The seeds are sown so closely together, there's no room for weeds to grow. You can't keep doing this, but you can do it 2 or 3 times. Already in that photo, the next crop of lettuce is in place and starting to grow, so the time between cuttings is really pretty slim. So my point of this is that farmers are responding in some very nimble ways to the challenges. Let's face it, the water that's going to be reallocated is going to come from farming because farmers use 80% of the water. But that's not to say that farming won't have a bright future going forward. A 4% reduction in ag consumption translates into almost a 50% increase in the water available for cities and industry. So just a modest reduction can get the job done. So what do I make of all of this? What I make of all of this is that we have treated water as we did the buffalo in the 19th century. That poor beast we brought within an inch of its extinction before it came back. Water we're treating without a great deal of respect, but we need to do better, and we can do better. And the menu that I have set out this morning, I think, suggests that conservation, reuse, desalination are all part of the menu going forward. I'd like to see an honest re-examination of what we do with human waste. But even beside that, I certainly know that we need to put price signals on the table to encourage conservation, and the reallocation of water from lower value to higher value uses. There are things we can individually do, and let me end with just two specific things that you might be thinking about. One, take a fresh look at that kitchen sink food disposal. If you use that food disposal 2 minutes a day, by the end of the month you will have used as much as 150 gallons of water just to get rid of food scraps that you could either put in the garbage or in your compost pile. So that's just a very easy thing that we can each do to save some water. And the second thing you can do is turn off a light. One 60-watt incandescent bulb that burns 12 hours a day will, by the end of the year, consume as much as 6,300 gallons of water. One light. So don't be mindless about electricity. You save power, but you're also saving water from turning off the lights. So is the crisis real? You bet it's real. But a crisis is a time of opportunities. A crisis is a time when we still have choices to make between going down one path or another path. And I think the future is bright, and I'm optimistic. But what we really need more than anything is the political will and the moral courage to act. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. I'd be glad to take some questions. Please.
What about home gardeners?
Home gardeners.
We have our home gardens that we're growing, we're having water.
Yeah, I have no problem with people growing gardens. I do have some friends in Tucson where I live that are into the sort of local food movement, and I just have to tell them, you know, really, if you want to do it, go do it, but it's not a viable system in Tucson. And why do you think that you'd be any better using water than the commercial farmers who've been in the business a long time? But if it makes you feel good and you want to grow your own tomatoes, that's great. But I've occasionally had a garden in Tucson. I had one in Michigan. Nothing have I ever tasted was better than the tomatoes I grew in my own garden in Michigan. And you can do it carefully. In Tucson, I used drip irrigation for what I was growing, mostly like herbs and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan of eating local and home gardens. Sir?
Hi. What about the meat industry? I saw one stat, it takes 660 gallons to make one hamburger.
Yeah.
And the consumption from the feed, producing the corn, to feeding the animals and slaughtering.
Yeah, it's a huge production, the beef industry. It's usually called the water footprint, and people try and see, you know, how much water is in a wool suit or in a pair of dungarees or a cotton shirt or something like that, and food products as well. One that you've probably been seeing the last couple of months is it takes a gallon of water to grow an almond. You've seen that sort of implicitly a criticism of almond growers. I don't have that same take. It takes 158 gallons of water to grow a watermelon. The truth is, anything you grow takes a heck of a lot of water. It doesn't matter. You know, irrigation for food or for non-food stuff that you're growing is a very, very intensive.
But the meat industry takes 10 plus more times the same water
absolutely
than any other source. 1 acre of greens for protein needs 10 acres for animal husbandry, for meat industry. So why doesn't people really concentrate on that factor?
Oh,
Even the environmental groups don't address it.
Oh, some are. I mean, there's a whole pitch, you probably have heard, a pitch for vegetarianism in the last 8 days by people saying the meat industry uses so much product, all of the chemicals that are used, the antibiotics in the meat industry, you know, certainly an important part of that. You know, I eat meat. Could I give it up? I could give it up. May I end up giving it up? I think you're going to see increasing costs for beef going up and other food products. And the more you have the market bear the cost of choices of food production, then more likely you'll see people converting to other forms of protein than meat. So I think that's an important contribution.
Hi. Thank you for bringing awareness to the gluttony of people using water around the planet. The biggest culprit of water users happens to be Floridians. They use more, about on average, 200 gallons per person per day.
Yeah.
I live in Florida, and my household uses less than 35 gallons per person per day. Does that shock you?
Florida or you?
Florida,
Yeah.
Florida, and our household using less than 35 gallons per day.
Good for you. That's a very low number, 35. Florida,
It is.
Florida doesn't shock me.
That's not my question, though. Okay, so we worked very, very diligently and consciously to get down that load. So I do appreciate you bringing awareness to the gluttony of the water and the importance of the hydrological cycle. I don't agree with your statement stewardship obligation for government to charge for water is accurate. I'm living proof. Stewardship obligation is for the individual to take complete 100% responsibility of how much water they use and where it is going. We have a septic drain field, and when you test our effluent, it has better standards than the nitrates and the phosphates for drinking water. So we are taking full responsibility for cleaning up the Floridan aquifer, 90% of which gives the water to the 19 million people in the state of Florida. I'm getting to, so we have solutions for cleaning up the water. Part of it is government control, not allowing people to do septic drain fields and making sure that you don't have 5 within a 1 mile square area that tends to contaminate the aquifer if you're not doing what we're doing. So there are solutions for cleaning this up. This gentleman was on the right track, decentralizing and growing your garden through SRI methods where there's 10 times higher yield and drastic water reduction, as Claire Hope Cummings so eloquently pointed out yesterday. This has not made it to the United States. It's very important. And then I would like your comment, because you obviously believe in climate change, but part of the inconvenient truth of the real truth about health is the fact that one person, very esteemed medical doctor, brought forth petitionproject.org, in which in the United States alone there's 31,500 scientists that have debunked global warming, and 9,000 are PhDs, 2,500 are MDs, and you can actually go there and find out which scientists in your state and what the science is to debunk the government propaganda. Now, my question to you is I'd like your opinion on the following. United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Action Plan, is a blueprint for depopulation under the guise of saving the environment, implemented through fear-mongering with man-made global warming, water shortages, and the Endangered Species Act in order to push through global policies of tyranny and to usher in a very profitable cap-and-trade program for the governments, not you and me, as well as global water and carbon tax schemes to tax the very water you drink and the air you breathe. Would you comment, please?
Any particular part you want me to comment? So let's take the stewardship thing first. I commend you. I mean, I wish all of my fellow citizens were as diligent and as conscientious as you are. They're not. And some of them just couldn't give a darn and won't buy in. You find some communities, I would say Tucson is among them, where the overwhelming number of people have bought in, and you're seeing people be good stewards of the land and of their water use. Some people aren't, and they won't. So using price signals to encourage people to use less water is a sensible tool in the box that I think we should implement. So I will just have to disagree on that. On the climate change, I don't know where you're getting this data. I heard that. I find it curious. It's maybe because I see a lot of scientists who are working on this, and I see what happened at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and what they've done. And the thing to remember about the IPCC more than anything else is that speaks the least common denominator of what the scientific community agrees. It's what they can all sign on to. Are there scientists whom I know and respect who wonder about aspects of climate change? Absolutely there are. These are all models that are predicting the future, and they're all very complicated models with a lot of moving pieces. That's why you're not seeing, very seldom will you see any climate scientists say anything about, say, the rains this week in Texas or the drought in California. All of those are too short a period of time to be able to generate much about. But when you look global-wide and you see that ocean temperatures are going up, that glaciers are melting, that the Arctic snowpacks are going down, that year after year of record heat is coming in, and on and on and on, the evidence is pretty overwhelming that change has occurred. Now, whether it's from the release of carbon dioxide, most scientists think it is, but I don't really care whether it is or isn't. The climate is changing, and that's going to mean water shortages going forward. Just to give you one very concrete example, when you see that photograph of Lake Mead with the bathtub, what that means is that when that water gets down to Hoover Dam, there will be less electricity produced. That's less power. Nice, clean hydropower. Whether we should have built the dams to begin with, that's a different kettle of fish. But when you've got a dam there that's generating high-quality, clean power, for goodness sakes, that's a good option. Without that option, the power is going to have to come from someplace else, and right now that typically means natural gas is the ready fallback position.
I'm curious, thank you for your presentation. I'm curious that you didn't mention Israel.
Sure.
They are the leader in the whole water topic.
Yeah.
As far as everything, from every aspect. And then also rain catchment, water from the air. There's just so many things worldwide that are happening.
Yeah.
Well,
let me
mention, so
Sure.
I'm curious.
Well, my talk was really about the United States, but let's take Israel first. Yeah, they're doing some great stuff. There's a company in Israel called Netafim, Netafim, and they've opened a U.S. branch, Netafim USA, and I've drunk the Kool-Aid on this. So let me tell you what they do. They do what's called subsurface drip irrigation. Now, we've all probably played in your garden, in my garden, with drip tubes, but this is large-scale commercial agriculture of alfalfa and cotton fields, and it's drip irrigation, and they are getting spectacular results. And so what I've been arguing for in op-eds and this report for Brookings last fall was we need really to focus on agricultural consumption, and a combination of subsurface drip as opposed to flood irrigation combined with temporarily halting the growing of alfalfa during the summer when it takes 4 times as much water and produces yields that are low. Those two things would go a long way toward helping. As for the water from the air, well, that's really the rooftop that I was talking about on San Juan Island. That's water harvesting. I'm a big fan of people trying to conserve water in every way they can. One of the things that's very interesting in the water world is what's called green infrastructure. And that started in Seattle and in Portland, Oregon, as a way of keeping municipal water out of the Willamette River and Puget Sound. And that is when you get a rainstorm and it hits impermeable rooftops, highways, sidewalks and the like, it runs off quickly. And so what they're trying to figure out is a way to move the water more slowly so it doesn't contaminate the bays, and that's called green infrastructure. You could have gardens on roofs, you can have cuts in the curbs, trees growing on sidewalks, all kinds of neat stuff. Philadelphia is the East Coast city that's doing the most. DC is doing quite a bit too. I mean, if you think about DC, every time they get a big rainstorm, you end up with raw sewage in the Potomac River because we foolishly combined our stormwater system with our sewer system. And when you get all of that stormwater hitting the sewer system water, it overwhelms the plant. So going forward, we certainly need to think about that. Well, I'm going to go outside and chat with you individually, but it's time to end the formal session. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming out. Thank you.